Halito, and welcome to Native Chalk Talk, a podcast by natives for all. Here we're keeping our Native ancestors' stories and history alive, while also sharing with you our Native culture, traditions, and more. I'm Rachel Youngman, a Choctaw originally from Anadarko, Oklahoma. I hope you'll enjoy this journey with me as we learn from our Native American guests. And I hope you'll do me a favor. Feel free to like and share these episodes. I so appreciate it. Yakuki.
Running isn't more important than their faith, their family, and our life. I believe that my sole mission in life, no matter what I'm doing, I should be an ambassador for Christ. He knew that when I turned 40 years old, I was going to start running and using this as a ministry. I've seen it through the people that He's brought into my life as a husband, as a father, as a runner. I've just seen it each day, how He's going to use this for His glory.
See and share our stories at togetherwe'remore.com.
You're listening to part 2 of this series. You're listening to part 3 of this series.
For those new to your work, Amy and Ian, can you share the journey that led you to create the first Choctaw book you both wrote and the mission behind it?
Sure. We both grew up with some Choctaw traditional food. I was fortunate to grow up in working in the gardens of my mom's side of the family. There was field pea that we used to grow. And I remember being out there in the hot summer and we'd be picking the peas. And sometimes if you weren't paying attention, instead of picking the pea, you'd pick a wasp. And then, you get this whole bowl full of these peas and then you go shell them and it wears out your thumbs over time. They turn green.
Yes.
And then when I was a kid, I didn't enjoy the flavor of it that much. So, I didn't appreciate this plant a whole lot. But as I was growing up, I also heard my family stories about it. And, they taught me that they had brought it from Mississippi back in the 1800s and that the family had kept these seeds going year after year after year by saving them. And they did it because it was a connection with their loved ones in Mississippi and with the homeland. And, actually this plant that I didn't appreciate that much was this deep and beautiful thing. Like I said, that's one story. I know that Amy grew up with a lot of traditional foods at home and at singings. Would you like to talk about any of those?
Sure. It's interesting. I never knew how special Choctaw Lifeway was until actually I started working with Choctaw Nation, and and of course meeting Ian because the way I grew up was in Choctaw Nation. I lived probably in McAllister, probably a short drive away from here, in this little community called Haywood. And one of the grassroots way of living, my parents had taken us to church quite often. We were very active in our church. And basically, I think that's like a generational thing because my grandfather, he was the one that pastored. And I guess that we just stayed in this same thing. Anyway, in the same religion for, until for a long time. And so during that time, it's interesting. So we go to these Choctaw churches, and the type of interaction you have between the elders and the children and all the ages in between is quite evident.
Yeah.
Because it's like with the elders, the children have an extra set of grandparents, and in any age in between, they have all these different aunts and uncles, depending on their ages, and probably honorary sisters and brothers, maybe, or cousins. So honorary cousins, everybody's honorary, because,
right?
Most of these quite knit. And I guess in a way, we were our own community. And seeing whenever I was younger, I thought everywhere was like that.
Yeah.
And as I got older, I found out that it wasn't, and that this is actually part of how this was part of Choctaw Lifeway. And learning about the foods, like the banaha bread, the walakshi, learning how to make those during as you're growing up, even though you didn't want to. But anyway, you learned it anyway. But
Right.
also, and also out going and gathering food. And one thing that they really loved to gather was wild onions. And
Yes.
we have gathered wild onions since I was young. And of course, whenever you're young, you're always interested in playing the dirt and using these really cool tools and stuff and digging these wild onions up. And as well, it's interesting because as you're doing that, most of the time the elders or even your own parents will sit there and talk to you about the importance of it, about how you can survive off of it, about how one day that sometimes that this may be all you need to this is what you need to eat, and you know exactly what it looks like, what you need to how to cook it, and how to clean it and everything.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because basically they include you in the whole process of it. And let's see, as far as gardening, my parents didn't do a lot of gardening. I remember that. Maybe one, maybe
Huh.
two, but it wasn't very. But but um, but as far as anything, it was interesting how inclusive it was too, along with the work of it. They
Mhm.
whatever the child's age was, they the parents or the honorary parents would show these children and include them in the work of how to clean the foods, do all kinds of tasks that was age appropriate for them.
Yeah.
So it was like a lifelong learning experience.
Mhm.
We both grew up with some traditional foods for sure. And as we started to research more about traditional indigenous Choctaw culture, I started coming across recipes for more Choctaw foods that are commonly seen today and ones that are made with, all native ingredients, not stuff that's commodity or comes from the store. So
Yeah.
kind of started to collect those recipes and we began with a starter farm. It was 13 acres. We had a couple of bison. We planted, I don't know, like 250 native fruit trees out there. One of the native foods that Amy taught me to love was the sand plum. When we first started dating, we'd go to her family's land, and her parents still live on their allotment land. And there are these sand plum thickets out there, and we'd go harvest grocery bags full of sand plums. And then they put them in their freezer and freeze them. And then on a hot day, you eat those, and they're tart, and they're better than a snow cone. They're so
Oh,
good.
I bet. So good.
So we planted those. We had an orchard of those that we planted in our front yard and different places in our woods. And around that time, Amy was diagnosed with a form of diabetes. And, the doctors were talking about taking certain types of medicines that really treat the symptoms, but not the root cause. And rather than just immediately start with that, we both decided to try to change our diet first and see what would happen. So we changed our diet to the indigenous types of foods that our ancestors had eaten, also equivalent foods from other communities around the world. So basically, we cut processed food out of our diet, cut sugar out of our diet, cut bread out, and tried to eat lots and lots of fruits and vegetables, especially raw ones. And within 3 months, we lost 70 pounds between us, and Amy was well outside of the diabetic range. And
Amazing.
we ate that way strictly for 2 years. And that whole time, we never even had a sore throat. Like we had so much energy, felt really good.
Mhm.
The challenge comes in that it's difficult to do that all the time because you're producing so much of your own food. If you're working a full-time job, if you're commuting two
Yes.
hours a day,
Going
it
to
gets
lunch
to
with friends.
where there's not enough time in the day to do that. So, to be honest, we backslide sometimes and our health goes down and it's like, oh, we got to get back on it. And we eat that way and our health just improves again immediately.
Mhm.
But
Oh.
we wanted to share that information in the Choctaw Food Book with the community, not just recipes, but really the deep connection with the land out of which our diet comes and how that's changed through time. Of course, anything that's alive changes and grows over time. So it's not just that our foods have changed over the last 100 years, but they were changing thousands of years ago too in developing. The Choctaw Food Book tries to present all of that in a way that people can learn about the foods while also learning about deep culture. But also, if they're interested, they can go to a supermarket and get ingredients and make healthy ones of our indigenous foods. You know, put that at the family dinner table. With Choctaw culture, the deeper you go, it all connects together. You know, it's not just food, it's not just traditional pottery, it's not just hunting, it's not just landscape management, it's not just language, it's not just history. Everything connects together in a whole. And so the book tries to get it down.
I love that it's a holistic picture of all of it. And it's a big book, that first edition, beautiful. It's so well done. And it's a heavy book as well. Just so people get an idea of, this isn't just your traditional book. It is jam-packed with such good stuff. And the first edition was always sold out. Anytime I tried to buy it, it was a huge success. And now a second and even improved edition of the book, Choctaw Food, will be coming out soon. When will the new edition launch?
It's tentatively slated to launch at Labor Day. And like you said, it's got a lot more information than the first. We've been able to learn more in the past 5 years, so it's got quite a bit more information. And it's something that we've done for the community from the beginning. It was donated to the tribe, so the tribe will be publishing it and offering it through the Tuscarora Capitol Museum and Cultural Center and other venues too, I think.
And does that mean people can get it online as well if they go to the Hushy, the gift shop website?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, that's great. Everybody's going to do a mad dash, as I said earlier before we started today, because I know I'm going to. I'm not going to miss out on it this time. And when we're saying Labor Day, it's Labor Day of 2025. So super exciting. What are some of the key updates readers can look forward to?
Well, the first one focused a lot on women's contributions to the foodway, which is as it should be, because women were the top food producers in Choctaw society. But this one, you know, men's roles balance women's roles, and what men brought into the foodway balances the plant-based foods that women contributed. This new edition talks a lot more about men's role in providing food. It provides quite a bit more information about hunting. Of course, now having been able to do that with traditional Choctaw archery equipment, it's able to put some of those experiences in there.
Mhm.
I had the opportunity to talk with some elders who shared information about Choctaw bird traps for small birds, about traps for turkeys, which is just fascinating
Oh,
stuff that I've never seen anywhere else. It's got that information in it. Choctaw Nation has a close relationship with the Musée du Quai Branly in Paris, France, and they have amazing collections of objects from the Southeast. A lot of them are probably Choctaw. They date to the 1700s. They were traded to French diplomats or given to them, and they brought them back to Europe and preserved them. They're like 100 years earlier than what you can see in museums here for Choctaw objects. So we've been able to study those in detail and a lot more about how the arrows were made back then, and those types of things. So that's incorporated into the book. It's benefited from assistance from professional botanists. The first edition has the Choctaw words for over 300 plant species, but I'm not a botanist, so there were some errors in the Latin species names, to be honest. I did my best, but there were some errors. Didn't have the best sources to work with, but now through a collaboration with professional botanists, the Latin side of that is good too. It's got significantly improved images in it, and more detailed information about Choctaw history in general, especially the early history.
can't even imagine it being improved. It was already excellent. And um, more power to y'all for putting so much time and energy into all of that research. I think you mentioned something about alligator hunting as well.
Yeah, there's an account about how Choctaws used to hunt alligators. I'm sure there were multiple methods, but this one talks about going out in canoes at night with a torch. And then the alligators would come up and they could see their eyes glint with the light from the torch. This was at a time period when they had rifles, so they would shoot at the eyes when they saw them, which was the least armored part of the animal. I'm sure they used bows and arrows back farther in time. There's an account that goes with that description. It talks about a group of Choctaw people, and they were out hunting, and there were two men in one of the canoes, and they went in to finish off an alligator, and one of the men fell into the water. And this was a person who'd been, it was his first hunt. He wasn't Choctaw, but he was bragging a lot about being able to go out and do that and how he was going to do this and that to the alligator. And so he ends up falling in the water, and his Choctaw partner in the boat talks about how he wasn't sure whether he should, go ahead and finish off the alligator and get that, or pull this guy out of the water, because the alligator, it had some value, but this guy had no value at all. So he was kind of at a loss as to what she should say.
And then it became Choctaw folklore probably over time. Well, and you expanded on the history of Choctaw speaking communities in Alabama. What new insights did you uncover there?
Choctaw Nation's been doing a lot of work to better understand our history in Alabama, and there are different reasons for that. One of them is working to repatriate our ancestors and the ancestors of other Musqueam speakers in Alabama. There are thousands of ancestors in that area who were exhumed from their graves, and then their bones were put into collections around the United States. And so we work to better determine who those ancestors are culturally affiliated with, so that we can return them to rest respectfully among the right tribe. Through that, we've learned a lot more about Choctaw history before and at the time of European contact in Alabama. From the information that we have, of course, Choctaw oral histories places in East Central Mississippi at Nan Awaya at the time of creation. But there are really early Choctaw stories. We talk about encountering mammoths in the Black Belt Prairie, probably in Alabama. Choctaw ancestors lived in that area for quite some time, as well as Mississippi. Around 1100 AD or so, we've learned that Choctaw society, ancestral Choctaw society, reorganized around corn agriculture. They changed their settlement patterns to take advantage of the soils that would produce the best corn. And those types of soils happen to be in western Alabama, not Mississippi, not eastern Mississippi. So a lot of communities that had been in Mississippi moved over into like the Tombigbee River drainage and the Alabama River drainage and the Mobile River, Mobile Bay, these areas in western Alabama. They lived there for hundreds of years. They were Choctaw speakers, but they started to develop their own unique cultural trajectory. And then European contact happened. Some of these communities fought against Hernando de Soto. Some of these communities were decimated by European disease after that. And one of their strategies was to overcome that was to amalgamate back together. Another strategy was to move to areas where they were better protected from the spread of disease, which meant moving away from those big river valleys I talked about. And they moved back to the area in Mississippi where their ancestors had lived 1,000 years before. So we've been learning a lot more about those connections with western Alabama and the different Choctaw towns that came from those areas.
I don't know about y'all, but I could sit and listen to these stories all day.
They're important to us too, and we've had the benefit of being to sit and listen to them from lots of other people and absorb those. So I'm glad that we can share them.
Yeah, well, and on a side note, you started with 13 acres, and then did eventually Choctaw Nation came in and you started partnering together, or how did that work?
No, it's something that we've done separately from Choctaw Nation. We've certainly been helped
Okay.
by friends like Michael here a lot, but it's not something that's a tribal initiative. It's something that we're doing to try to contribute to the tribe.
Amazing. What a calling. That has to be God-given.
There's nothing I would rather do. I mean, getting to hang out with Buffalo and getting to do cultural stuff and with cool people like Michael. I mean, I don't know what could be better than that.
Yeah, you're living your best life, man. The ancestors would be proud too.
I don't know. I picture them laughing at us sometimes when we make a mistake, and they probably think we're ridiculous sometimes.
It's like there's another way to do this.
There's a better tool for that. And you also rediscovered a plant name, correct me if I'm saying this wrong, Apilusa, and tell us about how that came to light.
There's an elder that I have a ton of respect for in the Antlers area, and he's got a lot of deep cultural knowledge. And he comes to the pottery classes that we used to teach, and he he just happened to share that name with us for a particular kind of plant. With the first Choctaw food book, I spent 4 years tracking down every single Choctaw plant name I could anywhere, talking to elders, looking through old obscure sources, everything. And he came along after that and had another plant name that I hadn't found. And so that was really exciting. Um, he's an amazing guy. He drew pictures of the plant to help us identify it. He went out and dug one of the plants to help us identify it. But we still don't quite have it pinned down yet. I hope that we can get its Latin species name this year maybe and add it to the information, because it's an important plant.
Oh, that has to be exciting.
He's incredible. Like, how many people would draw the plant where you could see it with a lot of skill and then go dig it for you too, just to try to help you identify it. That's pretty impressive.
Oh, I bet. Well, look at wow, you are draped in buffalo hide. I wonder if you'd get hot in there really fast under that robe. For those of you just listening and not watching, you should hop on over to YouTube when I post this, because Amy has a beautiful buffalo robe on her right now. I'm so jealous. Is that one of yours? Your buffalo?
It is, yeah.
Yes.
It's very warm too. We've been working a lot since we last spoke with you, learning how to better tan buffalo robes traditionally.
Yeah.
It's a deep Choctaw traditional art that is something unto itself.
Sure. What have you learned? What differences are you doing now?
Well, buffalo hides are really thick in certain areas. So one of the most important things that we've learned is, if you want to tan a robe that's soft, it's crucial to get the hide scraped down really, really thin. You take the hide off the animal, you scrape off the meat and fat, you put it into a frame, and then you let it dry part way or all of the way, and you scrape away almost all of the hide. So this is just about as thick as two thicknesses of construction paper. In some areas, that means it's had half an inch of hide scraped away. And by doing that, it makes it tan softer, but it also makes it so that it's a lot less work. It's gone from being 100 hours of work to sort of soften a buffalo hide. It's gone from that to being maybe 50, 60 hours of work to get a hide nice and soft. It's a lot more efficient. We've Choctaw Nation has a good partnership with the University of South Alabama, and they have significant archaeological collections from Choctaw-speaking communities that used to be at Mobile Bay. And in those collections, they have several scrapers that were made out of French glass, like the bottoms of French glass bottles, basically. Kind of like these. And I've been experimenting with these. Usually we process our hides, or I process hides mostly using stone tools. But these were kind of a novelty since they were at those Choctaw sites. So I tried them out, and they work really well for some parts of the process. For me, they work better than metal and better than some types of stone for getting certain parts of the hide thin. Like, for example, unfortunately, we had a calf stillborn a few weeks ago, and we're going to process its hide for on like this. But these will be the best tools for thinning it, just because they're so sharp on that thin hide. They can thin it without tearing holes in it. Wow. We've also learned for the tanning process, we use the brains from the animal. We use the bone marrow grease, and we use egg yolks. All of those are traditional. You put the tanning solution into the hide after it's thin, and you let it sit overnight, and you pull it out the next day, and you have to work the hide. You have to keep it moving and stretching in order for it to begin to soften. And it's a many-day process. So, the first night you'll soak the hide in the dressing solution, and then you'll work it the next day. And then that night you put it in the solution again, and then you work it the next day. And it'll take maybe 4 or 5 days of that to get it completely soft. Here in our humid climate, much like in the Choctaw homeland, the dressing solution can get bacteria in it and sour just overnight. If that happens, it can make the hide unpleasant. It can make the wool start to fall out. It attracts flies, all that kind of stuff. It makes it really unfun to do. Most people, not that there are tons of tanners out there, but most people overcome that by doing it inside, which of course our ancestors didn't. They did it outside. So we've learned that if you take smoke, like say say you're doing a hide like this, after it's softened, you expose it to smoke, and the smoke protects it from water damage. If you take a freshly smoked hide and soak it in water, some of that smoke will dissolve into the water. If you take that smoky water and put it into your dressing solution for the buffalo, it has natural formaldehyde in it and natural creosote in it that will keep the bacteria from growing. So you can, instead of souring overnight, this can sit out for 3 days and not go bad. And it also completely keeps the flies away. So it's an interesting way to do it. For a while, I thought that had to be the way Choctaw ancestors were doing it. But then with our connection with the Brahmin in France, they found these accounts of Choctaw buffalo hide tanners from the 1700s, and they were actually doing it a different way. So there's still more to
Wow.
learn.
Who would have
But
thought that the information would be over in France?
yeah,
That's
it's
crazy.
in some of the old accounts. There was a French person who spent years in the southeastern United States, and he was impressed with Native American hide tanning, and he thought that there were things that French hide tanners could learn from natives. So he published three different articles about the hide tanning process. But
Thank
if you do these
goodness.
things, you can get the hide really soft. I don't know if you can see this, but like
Yeah,
that
that's
is
it
its
looks so
wet.
thin.
Yeah. So
Wow.
they're really warm too. They're as warm as like being under like two comforters when it's cold. This is the best thing you could possibly wrap up in.
I
I plan
bet.
on using mine when I go camping when I get it finished.
Yeah. Oh, you'll be so warm. You could go out in the dead of winter. We used to go, the Wichita Mountains in Lawton. We used to go there every summer, several times throughout the summer, and we would camp in the primitive area, which means there's no electricity, no bathrooms or anything. And what we loved about it was sometimes in the middle of the night, buffalo would just come walking through our camp. And I remember my mom and dad would open the tent and they'd say, "Don't say anything, but just watch them." And it was just so cool. They were so majestic and they'd just slowly take their time walking through. And it was a little bit scary, but really exciting. And I think that's where my love of buffalo actually came from. But when you were kind of researching how to dress the hides, did you go to like other cultures as well? Like how did the Caddo do it? How did the Kiowa do it? Did you look at any of that too?
Yeah, I did because there aren't a whole lot of accounts about it.
Yeah.
So I took, the Choctaw hide tanning process for deer is known. My great grandfather tanned hides, but there are accounts, pretty detailed accounts of how Choctaws did that. So I
Mm.
took that as a basis, but then there are parts that are missing for how to do a buffalo hide because it's different than a deer. So I took
Yeah.
pieces from other tribes, traditions that were recorded in the past. There are other buffalo hide tanners. Some of them are really willing to share their knowledge. That our departments work to build relationships with other tribes for decades. We have good
Yeah.
working relationships with many other tribes, and knowing the people over there personally, that certainly helps to share information and work
Yeah.
together.
Also, being able to several different tribes now that we're being able to hunt with on different parts of Oklahoma instead of just being on Choctaw. There's several tribes that we can hunt with now through relations.
Ooh,
Absolutely, that's a good
that's
thing.
cool. What other tribes are those?
It's the five tribes, but then I think
Okay.
there's some other tribes that have joined too, and I don't know what they all are honestly.
Yeah. It's interesting because I actually grew up more around the Comanche and the Kiowa, the Apache, because of where we lived in Anadarko. And so I grew up knowing more of what their words were than my own Choctaw words. It was just so normal to be around them, putting their teepees up, very plains tribish. And so the things that I'm learning from you in our traditional Choctaw ways, so much of it is still new to me. So from your work at Nan Awaya Farm, what have you learned about Choctaw ancestors' use of range fires and bison grazing?
The land is really complex, and the more time that you spend on it, and the closer that you look, the more that complexity that you see. Um, I remember when I was a kid, I would think you just put some cows out in a pasture, and that was it. That was all there was to it, and it's not like that at all. The the plants in this part of the world, especially the grassland plants, are have adapted. They've been created in a way that they exist in cycles with fire, either natural fire or fire set by natives, and grazing by bison. We're getting to learn about that by being out here on the land every day. We get to see what happens with the landscape through those cycles, and also as it recovers from being mistreated in the past as we work to get more and more native plants out here. The way that things happened in the past here was in a given grassland environment. There's grass, but there are also forbs. Think about wildflowers, and the grasses will grow up and they will outcompete the forbs, and you'll have lots and lots and lots of grass. And eventually the grass will start to create thatch from previous year's growth. And that thatch is really flammable. So a fire will come through and burn all of that. And then new plant shoots will come up. And those new plant shoots are really nutritious and really tasty to bison and other grazing animals. So when a fire has happened in the past, the bison herds would come into that area and they would hang out there and eat that fresh growth of the grass. When the grass grows up and the bison eats it, then it sends up a new shoot. And that new shoot is also really full of nutrition for the bison. So they eat that. And that happens a few times, but eventually it starts to take away the resources that the plant has in its roots. So the grass starts to not grow back. When the grass gets stunted like that, then the forbs come in. Again, think wildflowers, pollinated plants, that kind of thing. They start to come in on the landscape, and they don't taste good to the bison. So the bison move on to another area. And these wildflowers dominate the landscape for a year, maybe 2 years. And then the grasses, by that time, the roots have started to rebuild and recover. So they will start to outcompete the flowers. And then you get all this grass, and then you get all this thatch, and then it burns, and it goes through the cycle every 3 or 4 years. So we've been learning about that, seeing that on the landscape and how that works, and how, not just over the long term, but day by day, how that happens.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
We are on 160 acres here, so of course it's not just like they're bison that migrate forever. We're on a finite piece of land. So to mimic that here, we have to make sure that we don't have too many animals. We're on 160 acres, but we only have 11 bison, including the calves. We only have 5 adult bison. That's about the right number for this amount of land, so it's not to overgraze it. And then we divided the land into 23 different pastures, and we rotate the animals between them. So each piece of land gets rest after the animals have been through or after it's been burned. So that's a way that you can mimic that natural system on a finite piece of land. And by doing that, it gives the land the characteristics that it needs for the native plants to come back.
Well, and March is a significant time for those burns. Why is that?
The season that a burn happens has a big impact on the land. So if you burn in the summertime, it will tend to kill out the trees and the brush. If you burn in the wintertime, it will foster the cool season grasses, the first grasses that come out, like the wild rye and that kind of thing. If you burn in March, then it's going to provide the conditions for warm season grasses to come out, like the blue stems and those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. The old accounts talk about Choctaws specifically burning in March. And, that's not the only time that they burn. But by focusing on March, they were trying to get native tall grasses to come in, presumably for bison to graze and that kind of thing. People don't realize it, but prairie was a significant part of the Choctaw homeland. There were 1.6 million acres of tall grass prairie in the Choctaw homeland. The southern third of Choctaw country was longleaf pine forest, which is these spaced out pine trees, basically in a tall grass prairie. And then even in some of the woodlands, the old accounts talk about how there was an open canopy where the sunlight hit the ground between the trees, and it was just a sea of wildflowers and just amazing smells through the rainy season. All of that was because the land was burned regularly by our ancestors, and at certain times it was grazed by bison and other animals. When you go to the homeland today, it's not the same. It's like this brushy thicket. That's not the place our ancestors lived. They had the knowledge to manage the land to be such a more beautiful place than what you see today in that part of the world. There are still places you can go and see what that looked like the Forest Service and some of the other major land managers in that area. as they work to try to restore the land to be what it was like 200 years ago, they're basically reinventing the techniques the Choctaw people used to manage the land for thousands of years. So it's neat to go not just to the homeland, but to go to those landscapes that are being restored like that and really look like they would have in the past.
Yeah. It makes you wonder how they figured out that burning the land was good for it and good for foliage and animals and humans. I was recording with Quanah Parker's descendants, so they're Comanche, and they are elders, and they were saying, how did we know how to do XYZ? How did we know early on in human existence how to do certain things? And they said they believe Creator taught us, Creator taught our people how to do things. And then we've just passed that on through the generations. And I loved that. So, what's next for Nan Awaya Farm and for you all?
We're doing our exterior fences now since the
Yes.
bison have learned to get through the electric fence. And like I said, Michael's helping us with that.
Thank
So
you, Michael.
that's our most immediate project. We are working to do more fire. So regularly, we'll be doing a burn here in a few weeks, actually,
Yes.
which I'm excited about. The lowlands here are a rare habitat called the sandy sea. So, they're in really good shape, but we're still working on the uplands. They've been damaged in the past and we're restoring them, but that's where most of our work is now is trying to continue to restore the uplands. We're excited for the next hunting season coming up. Someday I'd love to try to hunt with atlatls, which is the type of weapon that native people and people all over the world used before the bow and arrow. That would be a whole nother learning journey to figure out how to do that.
Oh, I'm sure there will be much more. We'll have to do a part 3 pretty soon. Well, Ian, Amy, and Mike, Yakoki for sharing your time, your wisdom, and these incredible stories with us today. Your work not only reconnects us to our food, but to the land, the ancestors, and of course, each other. Listeners, keep an eye out for the second edition of Choctaw Food later this year and follow Nan Awaya Farm to stay connected to their work at nanawaya.com. That's NANAWAYA.com. And for more insights into Ian and Amy Thompson's work, you can listen to the first interview we did on Native Choctaw Podcast Season 3, Episode 5. So if this story stirred something in you, I encourage you to think about the old ways that still call to us today and how we can bring them forward for the next 7 generations. I think a good idea is to start with the Choctaw Food book that's coming out again, because learning more about how we can learn from our land and learn about our traditional food and ways could be very powerful. Before we go, would any of you like to share some words of wisdom for our listeners?
I would say that, the traditional life ways of tribes and indigenous communities around the world, a lot of people think about them as being something just from the past, but they're not. What they are is they're alternative ways of living that our ancestors developed over thousands of years that work perfectly well. And they come from a different place than the world's dominant societies. They're not based on capitalism. They're not based on industrial economy, that type of thing. For that reason, in some ways, they have things that the world's dominant societies don't. That can lead to a better quality of life. They can lead to sustainability. They can lead to healthier communities. When people work to revitalize traditional skills, it's not about the past, but a lot of times it's about trying to regain the trajectory of development that tribes and other communities were on before being prevented by colonization. It's trying to regain that trajectory for the future, not about the past. So what we're doing, it's not historical reenactment or anything like that. It's trying to bring those things forward in a way that can benefit the future.
Like me, I grew up, I'm Choctaw, but I didn't grow up Choctaw necessarily. I mean, I didn't grow up like they did, being part of the Choctaw world necessarily. Kind of how I grew up, it was more of a not so good thing to be Choctaw. So, not necessarily for me, but my parents and grandparents.
Mm.
And the reason I'm doing more of this is I just want to learn more about where the Choctaws come from and what is a part of my history and my ability to try to learn as much as I can about it.
Well said. And so I think that that's something for all of us to take into consideration is, learning your roots and being able to apply that today. And it's never too late. Like I said, I grew up amongst the Plains tribes. So all of us can learn.
just just kind of be open to new experience because you never know what's there's one thing you never know what's going to happen and you never know what you're going to learn. So
Yeah. I mean, that's what you did, you and Ian and Mike. And look at this cool experience. You have buffalo in your backyard. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to follow, share, and join us on the next journey into the stories that make us who we are, Yakoki.